Our guest for today's episode is Gyan Lakhwani. He has previously interned at Zomato, Microsoft, and worked with the Prime Minister of India's office. He is currently working as a UX designer at Microsoft India. I am Mayank Khandelwal, and you are listening to Whiteboard.fm. Hey Gyan, what's up? Welcome to Whiteboard.fm. How's it going, man?
Good. I just started a new job and finished college just last month. So going good.
That's nice, man. So, for everyone, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Gyan. I am at Gyanl most places on the internet. I am from New Delhi and I've lived here most of my life. My formal background is in IT engineering, and then I studied interaction design. And recently, I started working at Microsoft as a user experience designer.
That's great, man. So Gyan, tell us more about how after IT engineering you went on to do your masters in IDC.
So I did engineering because it's sort of what you do as an Indian kid after after school, and
Yeah,
I already had an interest in design back when I was looking into courses for my undergraduate. But unfortunately, I just did not pay attention to the deadlines, and I didn't apply for any design colleges. And then I tried again in my first year of engineering, but I didn't get through anywhere. So even though I was interested in design, and formally it didn't, formally studying it didn't seem to be working out at the time. I still I spent a lot of I started studying IT engineering and I didn't love it. I found the classes a bit boring. And the way they taught it was, I think, very typical of Indian schools and also many colleges. There's a lot of focus on memorizing things and studying to ace the exam. And so you'd end up studying a lot of things with the sole purpose of writing it down in an exam and then forgetting it immediately afterwards. And so I had friends who were memorizing chunks of code so that they could write it down, and which, in my opinion, was just a terrible way to be spending 4 years of your time. So and even though I didn't like it too much, I didn't find it too hard to do. So I put the bare minimum required to keep my grades at an acceptable level, and I spent the rest of my time um learning new things, doing uh, picking up things from online courses, going for hackathons, going for talks and workshops. And so I think I spent a lot of my time trying to teach myself design in those 4 years. And uh, but even after that, I felt there were things that I didn't know and things I wanted to learn. So I applied for design courses after graduating, and I got through at NID and IDC for interaction design. And then I decided to go with IDC because I talked to a lot of people about who knew about both places, alumni of both colleges, and IDC seemed to have a very well-respected interaction design program.
yeah.
And I felt that maybe as an engineer, being in the IIT Bombay campus might also be an advantage. And I thought maybe there would be things I could learn from people there. And so I think it was a good decision. I've learned a lot at my time at IDC, and yeah, that's how that happened.
That's great, man. So, deep diving in a bit into your experience at IDC, um, two things. One, can you tell us more about how you what was the process of getting into IDC? And also, what was your day-to-day life like at IDC?
So IDC, there is an entrance exam called SEED, which is Common Entrance Exam for Design, and NID similarly has an exam called the Design Aptitude Test, or DAT. So I applied for both of those, and both exams I feel have a somewhat similar pattern. Though IDC, I feel I don't remember it too well because it was a while ago. But IDC perhaps has a little more science and math oriented questions, which I think NID has a little less of. So those are pretty standard entrance exams. I gave both. I cleared both. After that, if you clear the exams, there's a in-person interview round where you show off your portfolio and you answer questions from a panel of faculty and possibly some other people. So these questions tend to be about your experience so far, why you want to study design. At NID, I remember they asked me that since I'd already done some freelance work and I had work on my portfolio to show, they asked me why I even wanted to be studying design. And my answer was along the lines of feeling like I had managed to pick up the tools, but not necessarily the processes and how to approach problems. And so that's also why I wanted to maybe get in some formal design education. And I think your second question was what my day to day was like.
Correct.
So at IDC, the master's program, there's a bachelor's program as well, which is a 4-year program. But the master's program is a 2-year program, and there are 5 different specializations. Mine was interaction design. The first year has a lot of theory courses where, but you learn some things in the classroom, and then immediately there are projects that you where you try and implement whatever you've learned. So there's a lot of learning, but then there's a lot of immediately doing and practicing because I feel design is something you need to do to learn. You can't really just do the theory and feel like you know something.
Yeah.
And the second year has fewer theory courses and more and 2 large self-initiated projects that last the full semester. So your third and fourth semester will be larger self-initiated design projects where you're trying to do an end-to-end design or research project on your own. And so there's IIT Bombay is a residential campus, so pretty much everyone just stays in the hostel, and your day-to-day so there is a lot of work, and people tend to spend most of their time on at the IDC campus, and you just go back to your room to sleep and relax for a little bit. Most people work in the studio because a lot of the work was group work, and you needed to be with other people in your group to be doing that work. So, but the people at IDC were really great, and I made a lot of close friends in my time there. And it wasn't all work. There were a lot of celebrations for major festivals. People would just hang out also at IDC. At any point, you could walk into a studio at say 3 a.m. at night and find people playing music and just doing their work. So it was a pretty. I think I really enjoyed having that time and space to learn new things, as well as having people around me who I could learn from.
Yeah, it's about that culture, and also from what you said, it seems like there was a really good vibe.
Yeah, definitely. So different studios sort of had their own vibes, and we were right next to the animation studio, and animation in particular just has a lot of work because just animating takes a lot of time. So we pretty much always had and the animation studio next door just playing music and drawing just constantly. So it was very cool to be able to have that environment where you can go and get stuff done and talk to people and learn from them. And that's perhaps one of the advantages of going to design school. More than what you learn there, it's the environment and the fact that you'll have 2 or 4 years to purely to learn things. And I feel like people can learn a lot of the same things on their own as well. But if you're doing it on your own, chances are the focus is to get something done. It's either you're trying to finish a project on your own, or you're trying to finish freelance work. Possibly you've gotten a job and you're trying to learn something in order to do the job. But if you're studying design at a design school, chances are you'll be able to explore things that you might otherwise not do. And so there's a lot of other things, like there was a film club, so we screen films once every week, and I watched a lot of world cinema that I might otherwise not have done on my own. There's a book club, so we read things and then discussed books, and again, these are things I might not have read on my own, or I might not have discussed in as much detail with people. And so those were also learning experiences that I think were very valuable.
That's great, man. I'm pretty sure, like, after 4 years of engineering, 2 years of that design ecosystem would have been really refreshing.
Yeah, so I think I think IDC doesn't have as much of the design school vibe as some other design colleges. Most people have black hair, so uh, there's always one or two with colored hair, but otherwise IDC is a little more boring, because I think partly because there's a lot of engineers who come to IDC. There are a couple of architects, some people who study design, some people who've done fine arts, but a lot of engineers end up at IDC. So while the environment is yeah, it's still pretty great. I had a great time there.
Yeah, that's great, man. So, also while you were studying at IDC, you had done your internship at Zomato, right?
No, that was actually before that. It was in my third year of undergrad. So it was a
Okay.
design internship, but I did it before ADC happened.
Yeah. So, can you tell us more about it? Like, how did you, what was your internship process and what was the project that you worked on?
Yeah, so I went for, I think I wrote this down somewhere. Yeah, in 2016, when I was doing my undergrad, I went for this product thinking workshop that the Zomato design team had organized, and this was in Delhi, and their office was in Gurgaon. So, and they also had a farmhouse that Zomato just had, and they used to work out of, and was sort of their old office. So they had a design thinking workshop that I attended, and at the time I was an engineering student, but I put together a portfolio, and my aim for going to the workshop was talking to people, and then also hopefully trying to get an internship there. So the talk was pretty interesting, and then I made it a point to try and meet uh, some of the Zomato team there, and I talked to them about possibly working at Zomato. They asked me to send over my portfolio, which I did. They then invited me for an interview at their office, and I think I started working there maybe a few weeks after, during the winter. So, and my project at Zomato was so one of Zomato's advantages has been that they have up-to-date data about all their restaurants on their service, and how they do this is a very manual, labor-intensive process. They have full-time people whose job is to go to visit every restaurant that's listed on Zomato, and then confirm their details and check if anything has changed. So say if they have a new menu, the data collector will click a picture of their menu, um, and if any other details like the phone number has changed or they have a new website, they'll try and get that information as well. And if any new restaurants have opened up, then they'll also try and get those restaurants on Zomato. So this used to be a very manual. This used to be a process that was done on paper, and they eventually migrated it to an app. But the app uh, wasn't really designed. They just sort of handed the form to the engineering team, and they duplicated the form. So it wasn't really taking advantage of everything everything a mobile phone could do. So my internship project was to redesign this app. It was called Zomato Collect, and it involved talking to Zomato data collectors. I followed one of them as he through his day-to-day job to try and figure out what the pain points were. I then sort of mapped out the journey of the data collector as well as people interacting with the data collector. And I then eventually redesigned the app both visually and in terms of how the information was laid out in the app and how the data collector used it. And so there was because this was a sort of a legacy app that nobody had touched in a while. There was a lot of research I had to do within Zomato. I had to talk to people. I had to talk to the engineering team. I had to talk to their business people. And so there was a fair bit of just trying to figure out what their process was and then trying to streamline it. And I think in retrospect, even though I didn't know the term at the time, it was more of a service design project with a UI UX for an app, sort of as one of the deliverables.
Right. Nice. So this was your first internship project, right?
Actually, no. My first internship was right out of school,
Okay.
and at the time, I saw myself more as a graphic designer, and my college had some issues, so my batch started a month or two late. And I was fresh out of school, and I thought I didn't want to sit at home because all of my friends had already started college, so it's not like I had people to hang out with.
Yeah.
So my solution was to find an internship, and I interned with this. Um I saw this ad on Facebook for a ad agency that wanted a graphic that was looking for interns. And when I went to talk to them for the interview, they were also simultaneously working on a startup. And so even though the interview was for a graphic design position, I ended up uh, basically designing a website.
Oh,
And
nice.
the so it was there were these two IITians and one guy who was running the ad agency, and they wanted to. And so I ended up being their web designer without knowing too much about anything. But it was a very supportive team. They showed me a lot of resources, and I picked up a lot of things on the job. But that was probably my first internship, and that also sort of introduced me to UI UX uh, and looking at and not just graphic design.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Like the first project actually starts the learning curve, and after that, you keep compounding on what you feel is your requirement in terms of growing or what you feel is lacking in leveling up. So, Gyan, you interned, like you said, at the startup that was started by IITians and which was meant for a graphic designer, but then you started designing the websites. Then you interned at Zomato. Then and then you started interning at Microsoft through IDC because they came through campus placements.
That's true, right? So the Microsoft internship was that's one thing I didn't. I did apply in that they came to for campus recruitments, and I sent in my portfolio. But that was a relatively easier process because the placement cell handled a lot of the back and forth. But do I did there was a task that I had to do. Then there were, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of interviews, and then I got the internship.
What was the task?
I don't remember. I think, yeah, wait, I do remember. So I had to design uh, an app for an employee at a company to manage expenses during a trip and then submit a reimbursement form. Uh, and so this is something people working at larger companies have to do a fair bit. If they're ever traveling for work, they need to track everything that they're spending on and
Yeah.
then apply for a reimbursement later. So I think I designed a chatbot that would let people just sort of use natural language to say, hey, I spent this amount on this, and then click a photo of the receipt and just sort of have it automatically convert into a spreadsheet at the end of the month.
That's a good task for your internship actually. And what were the kind of follow-up questions that were asked during the interviews?
Again, this was, I think, over a year and a half ago, so I really don't remember.
Okay.
But I mean, these things tend to be the same. I think I've given enough interviews by now that there's a pattern, and they will try and ask you about your process for solving the task. So, what were the considerations you had in your mind? Did you do any research? What did you find out? And then they might try and ask you about specific design decisions and see if you had a rationale for doing what you did. And I think when you're starting out, there's a tendency to just do things and not have an explanation. And later on, hopefully, you have a reason for doing what you're doing. But often you're just doing the same things, but you're better able to express why you're doing it. Because as designers, sometimes there is also sort of an intuition that you develop over time, and to be able to explain why you did something in words is a very important skill. And perhaps that's something that and that's basically what you'll be asked in the interview. You'll be asked why you did what you did, and if you have a good answer, and if you can defend that answer with some data, hopefully, or some research, then that's ideal.
Yeah. That's true. That's definitely true. Like, same thing for what to include in your portfolio, right? If you're saying you're good at something, you should have your proof of work for that. Like, you should have things to back it up. Otherwise, you would not be taken seriously, or you would not be taken to the next round if you don't have work that backs up what you're saying that you're good at.
Yes, and you should. My approach has always been to show everything, but show the best things first. And every time, and in design interviews, you typically will not have time to talk about more than 2 or 3 projects. And so, uh, maybe if you want to um, if you're trying to focus on one type of thing, say you're trying to focus on your skills as a UI designer, then keep more of that in your portfolio. If you want to be if you're trying to apply for a UX position, try and show some research that you've done and some analysis and what insights you got out of it. Um, and but since a lot of starting positions tend to be generalist positions, then maybe it's best to show end-to-end work. So show a project where you started with research, do some insights, did some explorations, tried to sort of evaluate some of those explorations with real people, then maybe did a few rounds of iterations and then ended up at a final product. And so this is sort of generally the double diamond or user centered design process that a lot of people will follow. And
Yeah.
it's very important to follow that process, and it's a little bit boring sometimes. It can feel like it's very tempting to jump steps and just end up at a solution, and that's something I've done personally as well. But the the process is there for a reason, and if you are able to show that you followed the process in at least say 2 or 3 projects, then having that on your portfolio is extremely valuable.
For sure. Like, I'm totally aligned on what you're saying. Like, that definitely matters as well. Like, if you are, as a beginner at least, you should go towards the more generalist approach. And the only way you can prove that you're good as a generalist is if you can show as many, like, if you can show your breadth, like how well you cover your breadth in terms of work. Moving forward to your work at Microsoft, can you tell us more what your work at Microsoft was like?
So at Microsoft, I was part of something called the Foundry program. So design internships at Microsoft happen both as larger 6-month internships for colleges that have one full semester dedicated for internships, and as 2-month internships for colleges that have a smaller internship period. And so the Foundry program was a sort of a slightly different experience than the larger 6-month internships. And there were teams of 3 to 4 engineering interns and uh, one design intern that worked together on a project. And this sort of and you had mentors from Microsoft. There was one design mentor, one engineering mentor, and one product management mentor. And this sort of mirrors how teams at Microsoft and most other large tech companies work. There will be design, development, and product management. And so our team worked. I can't talk too much about it as this was work done under an NDA. But my task was to uh, again conduct user research and since this was Microsoft, most of what Microsoft does these days is focused on the workspace. So they wanted me to look at how people in the workspace manage their tasks. And so I conducted user research and I talked to, I think, 12 or 13 different professionals to check how they manage their tasks. What does their day look like? When do they plan their day? How do they do it? Some people use to-do apps. Some people might use their emails. Some people prefer pen and paper. So I did a lot of work around that. And then the second part of the project was to identify ways where I could use Microsoft technologies to make that process simpler. With the rationale that a lot of people waste time trying to figure out what to do, and if you could sort of guide them through that, maybe help them allocate time to do certain things, um, or maybe suggest related tasks or do that sort of stuff. And it was quite an open-ended project. They didn't give me an app to work on. They didn't tell me what technology to use, but they told me to look at what existed at Microsoft and if I could do something with it. So and I worked with the engineering team to sort of understand where Microsoft's natural language processing and AI capabilities were.
Right.
And since I myself had enough of an engineering background to be able to figure out some of it and say understand how an API works, how accurate or reliable the artificial intelligence results were, and how sometimes there are confidence intervals. So if you have a higher confidence in a result, you might try and show it differently than from a lower confidence result. And I mean, so what I ended up building was this sort of hack on top of Microsoft To Do, which is a to do app by Microsoft. And when you put in a task into To Do, it would parse it and understand what you wanted to do and suggest one-click actions for you to be able to do it. And it worked surprisingly well because I had a great team and we were able to work together. So we had a working demo where, say, if I put in talk to Mayank about interview, it would, and if you were a contact in my contact list, I could just um, get a button right there to start a conversation with you.
Oh, nice.
So, and there were some other things that we built as well. So I identified a couple of common workflows, and then we built these sort of smart actions around each of these workflows.
That's awesome, man. Like, what I really like about your experience that you mentioned right now is also it's very similar to what Microsoft Vancouver also does with their program called Microsoft Garage.
Yeah, I think I heard Dua's interview, and so that's definitely a similar sort of experience. And the Garage is actually the organization inside Microsoft that sponsors the Foundry program.
Oh, okay.
And there are teams around Microsoft that will sort of sponsor a problem statement. So you will be working with that team, but the physical space that you have is a little bit different. And how internships typically work otherwise is that you're embedded inside of a design team. So you will be working with only with other designers, and maybe at the end of the internship you might have to do some handoff with developers.
Right.
But in comparison, the Foundry program is more like a hackathon, 2 months long hackathon where you have something working at the end of your time there. So it was quite cool. I think it was a very fun way to do a design project, because as a designer, sometimes I'm unable to realize my ideas fully, because I will say build a clickable prototype or a concept and then it will just go nowhere. So it was quite it was great to be able to have something working at the end of the period, and because we had this working, we could also test it with people and get their opinions, and so that was quite good.
Yeah. Were you able to select by choice that you want to be a part of the Foundry program, or was it a chance by chance that that program was being present at that time?
I think the Foundry program is something Microsoft has been running for a while, at least a few years. And I think I didn't apply specifically for the Foundry program. They just sort of assign you on the basis of the interview and where they
Oh,
feel you might be a good fit. But I think sometimes it just boils down to chance as well.
got it. Got it. Also, Gyan, one thing which I really liked about when I was researching about you and going through your work is that you were a part of designing an app for the Prime Minister's office. So, can you tell us more about how did that happen and what was the process like?
Yeah, so that was a while ago. In 2015, some of my friends and I participated in an open competition to design and build an app for the Indian Prime Minister's office. There's this organization called MyGov, which is the Indian government's citizen participation wing. They do a lot of online stuff. They do competitions. Sometimes there's competitions to design logos for government agencies. Um, and in this case, they partnered with Google to run a competition where they wanted an app for the Prime Minister's office. And the first stage of this competition was just opening up opening this up to the general public and asking for ideas for what the public wanted to see in such an app. So say people wanted to be able to send letters to the prime minister, they wanted to be able to have complaints redressed, they wanted to be able to see what the prime minister is up to on his day to day, just see what different schemes the government has come out with. So they collected a lot. I think they had some 10,000 odd suggestions come in from people, and they selected some of these and created a requirements doc. And the second stage of this was, and I didn't participate in this, and I didn't know about this until later. But a later stage of the competition was once they already had sort of these features that they wanted to build, they opened it up as a competition and anyone could download this document and then submit wireframes for how they would build it out as a working application. And so this is a bit of a funny story, but one of my friends from school um, reached out and he asked if I wanted to go to the Taj for a free lunch that Google was posting. And I was like, yeah, sure. I have an exam tomorrow, but who cares about exams? Let's go eat a free meal.
Yeah.
And this apart from the free lunch, there was also a talk by people at Google who were sort of trying to explain what the design process for an app is like, because in 2015, I guess this still wasn't as widely known as maybe it is now. Um, and so, and my friends and I already had a little bit of experience with doing things at hackathons. I'd done that one internship. I'd done my first internship and I'd designed screens for a website. So I had some idea of how this stuff was done. And most of the other people at the venues were just like older, like techie engineering type people. And looking around the room, we just felt like we might actually have a shot at this, because it felt like everyone else was clueless, but we had some idea of what was going on. So we found a couple of other people. We created a team, and then we sent in our first round of wireframes, and we got through. We were selected in the top 10. 10 people. We were invited to give a presentation to a panel of people from the government and people from the industry. So we gave a more detailed talk of how we wanted to approach this. We had all sorts of things. We had, I think I remember one slide where we wrote something like, we have 25 combined years of experience between us, and when it's a 7-person team, that's like 3-4
Yeah.
years each. But and that's hackathon experience. But I feel like there was enough between the 7 of us that we were able to convince them that we weren't just kids playing around, and we had a real chance at being able to do this. And then we went from top 10 to top 5, and then our team came out as the final winners. And I think one other team was students, but everyone else was industry professionals. So I think just the fact that we took this so seriously and showed up for these meetings with like detailed presentations and stuff, like we have one person studying in the US, so we will have 24/7 availability. You can talk to us whenever if you have problems. So we just pitched really hard, and I think we managed to sell it to them. And so after that, however, even though we had our ideas about how we wanted to do things, the actual design and development took a year and a half. So there was a lot of back and forth. There were a lot of scalability, security, accessibility concerns. We had design reviews with the Google team. We had, I think, some of our team members went to Hyderabad to Google's campus there to review what we were trying to do. We had some online calls with Google's design team. We had meetings with government officials. So there was just a lot of back and forth about what we were trying to do. A lot of late feature suggestions that sometimes were just strange. I think I don't want to go into how strange some of those
Yeah.
ideas were. Uh, but but at the end of it, and so what motivated our team honestly was the fact that the winning team, once we developed this app and released it, was got a all expenses paid week-long trip to Google's headquarters in Mountain View. And as a bunch of nerds, that was like Disneyland. And and so we did that. Yeah, it took a really long time to design, develop, and get all our clearances. There was extensive security testing. There was load testing. We had to make sure we had to at some points translate the app ourselves into other languages, because we wanted to support 2 languages at launch, and with more languages supported later on. And yeah, we did it, and then we went to California for a week. That was fun.
What a massive learning curve, man. Like from starting off as a normal designer and just doing basic design work to focusing on things like security and something which does not even pertain the designer at a lot of levels, and which is normally taken care by a separate security team in companies. Doing all of that would have just kickstarted like another level of motivation and a vision of what you want to do.
So that's true with larger companies, but most of my early work experience was with startups. And the way things work there is you come in and you do everything.
Yeah,
And
true.
so a lot of my early work experience involved designing the logo and branding, designing business cards, designing a website, designing an app, designing social media collaterals. So you just come in and you do everything. And with the PMO app, since our team did have an Android developer, a backend developer, and actually 3 designers and 2 people who were just sort of generalists, we So it was sort of up to us to handle a lot of these things and understand the requirements and then implement those things. So
Yeah.
even though I wasn't directly dealing with some of these things, our developers were, we still sort of needed to be clear on how it was impacting the app. So say with the accessibility options, we both needed say with the accessibility options, I needed to design how they would be visible in the app. So say if there was text anywhere, we wanted people to be able to dynamically adjust the text. There was a dark theme, and say with the language options, we wanted people to be able to access all of those options early on, but then also sort of accommodate for the difference in glyph sizes in different apps. So say if you use a typical Latin font for English and you use a Devanagari font for Hindi, the Devanagari font might visually look a little bit smaller, and so you might need to adjust for that when you're designing for different languages. So
Right.
a lot of these things were places where I had to collaborate with the developers, and that's going to be true every time you work with a startup. And honestly, even with larger companies like Microsoft, you can do design things, but you can't just say that this is not my job, because if you don't do it, someone else might do a worse job. And I think to an extent, as the designer, you're just the advocate for the user. And so anytime you feel like the user's experience might suffer because someone else might take a shortcut or might do it the easy way or just not do it in the best possible way, you need to step in and make some noise and get it sorted, even if you don't really know how.
For sure, bro. For sure. Like like designers are the gatekeepers, like wherever they work, I feel, because no one's going to make sure or go the hard way to make sure that the quality and the experience is the way it should be. Like designers have to be the gatekeepers to fight for what should be done and also to refuse for something which is would be considered as a bad idea. So definitely, man, aligned on that. Great, man. So this has been your entire journey, and if I had to ask you what your top three learnings are, what would they be?
My top three learnings. That's that's such a interview question,
Yeah,
but
it's like a reflection. It's like a reflection on your journey. That if you had to sum it up to top three learnings, what would they be?
I think I thought more of this as I say what I would try and tell someone else who's trying to do this now, because there are a lot of small things that I've learned over time, and maybe it's a little bit harder to club them into larger learnings. But
Right.
I feel like you should always you should try and keep learning new things and doing new things. And because it's very easy to box yourself into this little box of UI designer or UX designer, and then just feel like everything outside of that is not your concern. But developing maybe a more holistic view of the world and how things work. Say even with any product, while you're responsible for maybe the look and feel of it, and that's your job description. A lot of other things are also going to impact how it's going to work. At the end of the day, most products are in some ways looking at a profit motive, so they will try and you need to make money somehow. And so understanding a little bit of how the business side works is helpful. Understanding how your design will be implemented and how it will be coded, what restrictions might be faced from that side, again is very useful. And so you shouldn't box yourself in and feel like this is all I have to learn, because there's always something else you could be doing. And you don't need to do any of this, but I mean, everything you learn comes in use somewhere. And engineering, so for a while, because I was so frustrated with how engineering was taught, I just felt like I wasted 4 years doing that. And but it taught there were definitely things I learned there, and it allowed me to do more interactive um, websites and installation type projects, which I might not have been able to do otherwise. I've generally found it easier to work with developers, and the handoff between design and development is a little bit smoother because we're talking the same language. I understand what they need to get their job done, and so I think you should just try and learn as much as you can and not box yourself into these little categories. And even now, I consider myself a generalist. I can do UI work. I've done UX research. I can do. I've done illustrations. Sometimes I can code. So I've done. I don't usually do that, but for a few clients, I've also developed websites. So and it's been good to be able to have that flexibility and do different things, and it also keeps things from getting too boring.
Great, man. So, last question, which is that if you had, what are some of the things that you wish you knew when when you were starting off?
um, there's there's a lot of things that will not work out, especially if you try and teach yourself things. And You can learn from your own mistakes, and that's painful. And a lot of times things, and like, I'm talking to you only about the things that worked out, but I've had 5 years of things working out once in a while, but I've also had bad projects which I've taken and then just like hated but finished anyway. I've had
Yeah.
clients who've not paid up, and I've had I've I mean, as an engineering undergrad, I wanted to study design, and then that didn't work out, and so I did engineering. And so sometimes things are just not going to work out, and sometimes it's going to be, you can do things differently and learn from that. And as cliched as it sounds, it can be a learning experience. Other times it's just bad luck, and you no matter what you would have done, just things just weren't going to work out. So um, and failing frequently and failing often is going to teach you a lot. And especially as a young creative, uh, there is sort of this, and this I'm paraphrasing from someone else, but I forget who. You have sort of this taste. You have an idea of what is good and what looks good, and you can recognize it, but you're perhaps at a place where you're unable to create good work. But because you have that taste, you can see that this is not as good as it could be, and
Yeah.
that can be frustrating. But the only way to get through that is to do a lot of work. And so maybe you have 10,000 bad ideas in your head, but if you get all of those out, maybe you'll have better ideas. Um, and the second thing maybe is that even though you are going to make mistakes and you will learn from those, and you can also learn from other people's mistakes, and you can read things that other people have written. And there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet, but I'd also recommend reading books about design, because even though there's just a lot of content on the internet, there's Medium, there's YouTube, and there's more courses now than there were perhaps when I was trying to pick up some of these things, and one should take advantage of these things. But I think the sort of compressed knowledge that you will get out of books is something that is maybe a little bit underrated, and people should do that a little bit more. And I myself have started to read a little bit more after I went to IDC, because there's just sometimes you will read a book and then so many things will just sort of start clicking in your head, and that's something I would recommend people do more.
That's great advice, man. Like, yeah, that's nuanced advice, and I feel it's great. So, thanks a lot, Gyan. This brings us to the end of our interview. It was great having you, man. Like your story, and especially since, like, I've gotten to know about you by following you on Twitter. And
Oh yes. So I went slightly viral for posting that I have a job now.
yeah,
This is quite surreal. I made basically the same post on LinkedIn, and 2 days later, I have 6,000 likes, and people are messaging me left, right, center to ask about how did I do it. And it's I mean, it's basically 5 years of grinding. That's the answer.
definitely, for
It's
sure.
there's luck. The fact that I was privileged enough to be in the position I am. I went to a good school. I had the resources to take up a discipline that maybe some parents would be a little hesitant to let their children do. Even though now I feel this is trendy almost. This is what people want their kids to be doing. I had parents who supported me. I was able to do a lot of this, and some of it was just luck. Some of it was there was a lot of hard work, but sometimes I got lucky as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and I hope you liked it. If you watched the entire video, drop a comment below sharing your favorite learnings from this interview to let us know. Subscribe to the Whiteboard.fm YouTube channel to check out other episodes and clips from this interview. This podcast is a part of the 10K Designers Network. You can check out other projects on 10kdesigners.com.